And this is the panel on cloud computing. The name of the panel is Cloud Computing Spectrum, from low-hanging fruits to game-changing transformation. Please allow me to introduce the moderator of the panel, Mr. Ted Schadler. He's the VP and the Principal Analyst of Forrester Research. Now I will allow Ted to introduce the panelists. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I think we're going to have an exciting time here. We're going to take your questions, but as before, we're going to start with conversation amongst us as we talk about cloud. I'm inclined to talk for about 20 minutes and make it, but I can't do that. Every moderator has this problem. This is really about the panelists and their stories. So we'll jump to it pretty quickly. I'm going to introduce them in turn, our panelists, and ask you to, in about 2 minutes, really short, just introduce yourself and your role, your organization, and then one cloud thing, a project, a lesson, a something meaningful that you're engaged with today with cloud computing. And I'm going to start with Einik Kamins. Einik, maybe you could introduce yourself and your role at Thermo Fisher.
Sure. I'm the global CIO for Thermo Fisher Scientific. We're a $10+ billion global company that makes anything in the science world, from instruments to beakers, refrigerator devices to genes. We are using the cloud computing environment for external services for our customers and for internal efficiencies to drive better performance within our IT organization.
So 2 objectives, really: internal operations and how to optimize those, maybe free up some capital, free up some labor, free up some people, so you can then execute in an external way to build new services for customers. Good. Well, I'd like to come back and explore those with you in a few minutes, but why don't we go ahead and ask Alan Shortnessy to introduce himself and his organization. Alan.
Yes, hello. My name is Alan Shortnessy, and I'm a cloud architect within the ISV Alliances organization at VMware. And in the interest of low-hanging fruit, my day-to-day responsibilities are largely centered around partnering with ISVs to bring to bear the most robust, probably, cloud ecosystem that we can, and also looking at ISVs who need to run on top of that cloud ecosystem. And you know, in the interest of future, one of the projects that I worked on actually at Intel that I'm still keeping a close eye on is a community cloud for delivering trusted silicon to the parts of the federal government that need such a thing from a trusted foundry. And so this community cloud concept is something that is being looked at as a new type of cloud within NIST, but having looked at the requirements and the trust capabilities, I felt like it was something that exercises the economics, the policies, and I think most importantly for the CIOs here, you know, the controls. And I think everything is sort of a concentric subset of those vectors in terms of the cloud reference architectures that we look at in the future.
So a lot of hard work in building the capability to ultimately be able to deliver these highly secure, managed services. Good, well, we'll come back and talk about that as well. Thank you, Alan. Ali Shubman, perhaps I could ask you to go next and talk about your experiences at Hewlett-Packard.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Shadman. I'm the CTO for our technology services consulting organization in the company. And my particular charter is developing the content and the material for our services groups to attack a variety of projects, including cloud. And we do get involved a lot in areas of strategy, implementation, design, and so on and so forth. I think one of the most interesting things for me in terms of cloud computing is the notion, what I found in customers, that cloud is somewhat of a silver bullet, and it helps them remove some of the responsibility in the operations and move it to some external party. And I think that was an interesting observation. And of course, it's not the case. And a lot of times, the operational processes are an integral part of a successful cloud implementation. And other areas that I think that I can share with the folks here is some of the new emerging trends that I've seen in the marketplace that are the direct result of cloud computing maturity. For example, the interest from many large enterprises to unlock and monetize IP that's been developed within the corporations using cloud computing. And I think that's going to be a very major trend the marketplace going forward.
So when we think about business transformation, it will be harnessing, taking advantage of what the corporation can do, and extending it out to customers and others through cloud-hosted services.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. I think this is a common theme we're starting to hear over and over, and I'd like to explore it with us all a little later. But first, Sadiq, perhaps I could ask you to introduce yourself and your organization.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sadiq Raj. I run Accenture Cloud Services here in North America, and my team helps our clients move across to the cloud. In terms of an example, I think there's lots of great examples of greater effectiveness, efficiency, standardization that companies are doing now, leveraging the cloud. But the example I'm thinking of is a client that I've been working with over the last several years. It's a high-tech company with rapid growth, and they're expanding in developing markets, and they're looking to exploit indirect channels. And they didn't have their business models cracked. They were very much in flux. And they chose the cloud to help them flesh out those models versus taking a traditional path of a strategy and program and implementation. They wanted cloud to help a more iterative, agile path to develop those business models, which was, worked well in lots of areas, and they see it as a tremendous success. There were some things it didn't work well for, so it was a kind of great learning.
Good. Well, thank you, one and all. So I'd like to do this a little bit like peeling back the layers of the onion, I guess, and you're never quite sure where to start, but perhaps we could talk about this low-hanging fruit thing, right? What's vital now? And I think our CIOs are also looking for advice based on experience, based on what has worked and what has not worked. So maybe we could, as a next step, really drill into this question about what's critical today. I mean, if you don't get started today, what are you missing? So what's that near-term project? And maybe, Aina, again, I could start with you.
We looked at the innovation space and said we needed to get some solutions for our customers out to market quickly, get them out fast without us having to do a lot of learning and a lot of research and a lot of building and studying and moving into that analysis
So
paralysis.
this is because of the competitive environment?
Yes, exactly. The
And so
competitive
does service
environment.
enable your product line?
Right. So we had a product that's very well recognized in the scientific space, which is our Laboratory Information Management System. So we teamed with CSC and put that solution together and put it in the cloud. So we offer LIMS on the cloud as a software application for our scientists to use to manage and track all their information in their science space.
So when you think about cloud, there's sort of OpEx, right? We spend as we go instead of CapEx, buy a bunch of servers and build a bunch of applications. There's also the agility, the ability to add new features faster because it's one place. And there are other vectors of value as well. When you think about what made the cloud an ideal sort of foundation or platform for that delivery, what was it that mattered? What were you looking for in a cloud provider, or why cloud, why not on-prem?
We knew our customers didn't want to invest a lot of money in standing up a LIMS solution in their space. They didn't want to have to do the research themselves and figure out how to take it to the cloud. So we teamed with our partner that we were already doing work with them and said, let's go to the cloud together with our solution, your environment. It satisfies us getting to market faster, and it gives a place for our customers to come to without them having to make the investment.
So it turns you into a service provider then.
Yes.
And you must partner with, is it a public cloud provider? Is it a private cloud?
Private cloud.
It's a private cloud, okay. So you built it internally and are operating it yourselves. Okay, good. I think that's great. And I think we need to come back and understand, as a business transformational activity, what additional workloads. But before we do that, let's go ahead and pursue this low-hanging fruit thing. And Ali, maybe I'll ask you to talk about some of the applications and name some apps and some processes and some industries where there's low-hanging fruit here, where there's opportunity.
Sure. No, I'll try to share with you as many real examples as I can. So in terms of low-hanging fruit, I'll give you one very interesting example that is, I think, going to become a pattern in the marketplace, and that's the transition of a telco to become a cloud provider. And what we've seen is a great desire by the telco providers to be able to leverage their billing systems, their way of delivering services and utility to the customers, and the facilities they've created, and turn it into a profit center in different ways. So we actually engaged with a very large provider outside of the United States, and help them transition their traditional environment, the IT environment, they were already doing in hosting, but to become a real cloud provider, so you can actually build and provision systems on their infrastructure, was a way to be able to leverage what the investments they've made previously in a different way to generate additional revenue.
So let's drill into that, because I know you talked about being a service provider to your customers. In this case, your customer, the telco, is being a service provider to their customers.
Exactly.
What does it take to be a service provider? What goes into that? What matters? You mentioned billing, but what else matters in really being able to extend your IP out to serve customer problems?
So, again, I think you have to go look back at some of the basic tenets of cloud, for example, right? The being able to provision services quickly, that's a real key differentiator. If it takes a long time, obviously, that takes away from the value. I think some of the security aspects, again, depends what area you want to play in, but the security of cloud services become very critical. That's the key area. Being able to have the flexibility of the APIs to be able to integrate cloud on-premise, off-premise with traditional systems and create really a hybrid environment, which is really the reality of the world that we're going to be living in for a number of years. These are the real issues that you have to deal with as an enterprise provider of services and applications before you even begin to contemplate what types of apps to roll out. You have to have the foundation.
Sounds hard to me. I think we'll have to come back and talk some more about that. But Ali, Sandeep, perhaps you could talk a little bit about this low-hanging fruit and kind of the near-term opportunity to take advantage of the cloud.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I had a client recently, I was talking about this, and he asked this question around low-hanging fruit, and he had this category of apps called CLAs. And when I asked him, what is that? He said, these are the crappy little apps. and it turned out, that this was a real headache. And they were prime in the sweet spot for moving into some of these cloud platforms. And so, as you kind of peel back the onion, there were the CLAs, but there were also, some of these software as a service capabilities. He was thinking about more in a two-tier model. It wasn't about replacing, lift and shift everything to the cloud, in this case, the public cloud. This was about cherry picking in new markets, new businesses, where he could take advantage of some of these things in a mode of speed that he just wasn't able to do in the past. So I think you hear very much of a kind of portfolio view of looking at his migration.
Yeah. Alan, so we hear a lot about public cloud, private cloud. Before I ask you, let me actually a little show of hands here. How many of you know the difference between a public cloud and a private cloud? We'll show everybody. Okay, so not an issue, but VMware is a company that is really tackling both environments. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you have a different approach? Is the technology different for a private or public cloud?
Yeah, going back to your point and also to build on previous statements here, I think some of the most important things are to gain a mastery of what cloud means for yourself. I mean, just like trust is very different for every party involved in some of the more complex cloud challenges like I talked about before, the ability to establish vectors of control, really. And your cloud is our big marketing message for the year, and that goes back to understanding what you're doing with virtualization, understanding what it means to control these assets, as was said, in a portfolio state almost, so that you think of hypervisor and these technologies. Cloud itself is one big sensor, essentially generating all of this data. And so you've got to be able to capture that and understand it to be able to negotiate the kinds of SLAs on the proper vectors that you want. And I think in addition, you've got to be able to leverage the kinds of technologies that are in place to, like from a cybersecurity perspective, maybe provision a honeypot upon detecting an attack, or from a marketing perspective, maybe try to upsell some compute capacity in an automated fashion. And so these are the types of sort of bidirectional interactions that you get.
So I want to go to something really a little more fundamental, I think, than that. It comes down to cost. So I mean, look at these gigundo data centers, and the airplanes fly over, and Google puts the video up, and these things they're huge. Now, people are bragging about their containers, right? These are the things that go on the back of a truck that are full of servers, and 100,000 blades or whatever are in them. Well, these data farms have, 100, 200, 300, 500 containers worth of stuff? That's the public cloud. huge amounts of automation, tremendous efficiency, the lowest cost power you can get, right? 5 people in the whole place running around making the thing go. Private cloud, I can have a whole container, 1 container, as opposed to 500. I probably have the same 5 people running around fixing stuff in it. The economics don't make sense to me. I can't do the math on the cost being the same for a private cloud or a public cloud. So the question is, which is cheaper? Is a private cloud going to be cheaper? Is a public cloud going to be a lot cheaper?
I can take a crack at that one.
That's great.
Sure. So I think it's a good question, but you got to look at it from the context of your business. So if you are an SMB, you're a small company or a medium-sized company, probably the economics of it weigh more towards the public cloud as opposed to building your own infrastructure. If you're an enterprise that has operational demands, has data governance and security needs, has a complex portfolio of applications, the cost of operating that environment on-premise or off-premise depends on your risk tolerance. And that's really what it comes down to. So even though the functionality may be available similarly on the outside world, you may not be able to tolerate the risk of the SLAs that you cannot get from the outside cloud provider. You have to be able to do that internally.
So do you think we'll, in the public cloud, get to that level of confidence and security, Ina?
I'm holding out on that one a bit. Okay, when I'm thinking about my customer data, I'm very cautious to put it out there in the public cloud.
Yeah.
Security is that layer of the whole cloud computing space that certainly has us most confused.
Yeah.
I spent the whole morning with 10 other CIOs, and we voted hands down, security in the cloud is our biggest concern.
Yeah, yeah. So when you think about Google and Amazon as the biggest, and Microsoft, I guess now, as the biggest cloud providers, if you had to say freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, where senior is maybe ready for the government, and freshman is where would you put them? Where are they in their training, their ability to operate a public cloud to the level of confidence that you would need?
I'll put Google and Amazon maybe as a junior and Microsoft as a sophomore.
Wow, boy, that's to give them a lot more credit than I would, actually. I've called it sophomoric. Yeah. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because sophomore year is a big year, right? It takes a tremendous amount of passion and commitment to get that far. But boy, does it seem real simple to me right now. And that's why you're doing a private cloud, right? Mm-hmm. Who else would like to weigh in on this private cloud, public cloud thing?
Well, I just want to make a point that it's such an evolution. I mean, to say it's a static position that we kind of look at this league table, actually that isn't the case. It's like you're boarding a moving bus. When I look back at what we were doing a year ago, there's definitely things that have changed even now in the space of these 12 months. So I think of it as a living roadmap of how do you evolve? How does this portfolio change over time? And it's different service levels, different appetite for risk. Fundamentally now, there's some aspects of data where I think some clients would challenge that the public cloud wouldn't be the more secure place to put some stuff, right? I mean, when I look at some customer data around CRM and HR data and so on, so I feel like it's this moving bus.
Yeah. Yeah. So where are we on that? Let's say it's a 9-inning game. What inning are we in? First inning? Second inning?
Well, I know in terms of cricket, we're in the early innings.
Would you agree with that, Alan?
Well, cricket matches I've seen last for days.
Yeah, so I know. I'm a little worried about going there.
Not to bash any of the providers that you mentioned, but I think on that continuum, we as cloud writ large are growing probably faster than anything we've ever seen, because it's an amalgamation of so many things. And so I would characterize us as a toddler who has shed the diapers and is really learning how to ride a bike, but that has, world is fraught with challenges. Now, I would also just add that, back to my previous point, the ability to automate through virtualization puts a new API in the hands of the application and data center architects. And a perfect example of this is like what you're talking about. People with many acres under roof have a big HVAC design consideration as a big part of their power, where the ability to literally move workload from part to part of a data center based on just the trajectory of the sunlight, can have a tremendous impact on power consumption. So these are the types of things and integrations that are now possible when you free yourself from thinking about physical infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, why don't we come back and talk about some of this low-hanging fruit? Nobody's mentioned email, nobody's mentioned web, nobody's mentioned Salesforce yet. I mean, let's talk about some of the real near-in opportunities here. Who would like to talk about some of those potentials?
I can take that one. Again, I'll give you, shared some real-life examples with you. So I think in terms of low-hanging fruit, if you look at messaging and collaboration, certainly do lend themselves very well to a cloud-based implementation.
Why is that?
Because of the types of application, the service levels, you can tolerate some level of service levels that you may not be able to tolerate in a classic production operational environment. The types of access that you need, be able to have the ubiquitous access, lend themselves very well. And the vendors and the systems are actually very mature in that particular area. So that's a very well-known example. In a real-life situation, we had a client, high-tech provider, who wanted to be able to optimize their OpEx by using the cloud services. Yeah. And what we did in that particular situation was to create a hybrid environment where the telephony was remained on-premise, but the messaging application actually moved to the cloud. And we integrated two things together. Yeah. They got the best of both worlds. They were able to reduce their OpEx without sacrificing the operational desires of the customers.
So there's a prioritization of the applications that went based on the requirements. So other sort of contribution or thoughts on these apps?
Another factor that helps with the prioritization of what you move to the cloud when is how much are you taking up there. If you think of in our operating environments, we have these huge legacy systems, whether they're a mainframe application or a package software running in a Wintel environment or whatever. You just have huge amounts of data, huge amounts of history. Moving that is just, you don't go there.
Yeah.
So you're going to start with something new or fresh, or, okay, now starting next Monday, we're going to put email in the cloud. And you're not going to bring your history with you.
Right.
So that limits some of what your whole portfolio that you want to start with. Starting with a Salesforce or a collaboration type tools or video type tools. We're also looking at using the cloud for huge bursts of storage needs that we have, or a huge development effort or a testing effort where we need multiple testing environments for a laboratory environment where we need to prove the controls are in place 4 or 5, 6 times.
Right. And do your developers love it? Do they just go use stuff, or have you set them up with a private cloud as well?
We're very cautious because, if you just give them the world, they go out there, and even though it's less expensive, it gets, the unit price is maybe good, but they use tons. So we're very careful what we're doing.
You don't want to just turn them loose.
No.
Have you talked about establishing a relationship with a public supplier that you could work on, but then bring the real workload on-prem and in your private cloud when it matures?
That's not a low-hanging fruit. We're not there yet.
Okay, so we'll come back and talk about that one. All right, good. Other applications that are low-hanging fruit? Salesforce we've heard a lot about. Alan, any?
We work with so many different vendors, but there are a lot that are what we call PaaS friendly. Yeah. And so we have Cloud Foundry, and there are other APIs out there, and so an application that is multi-tiered might, lend itself to this sort of development, and then therefore portability to the cloud. But I would just add that back to my previous point, the entire cloud itself is kind of a service-oriented facade. And so even though I might continue to connect at layer 3, IP, converged networking, 10 gigabaud, and all these things we do in the data center are now, there's a facade there that allows us to control things differently. So everything as a service.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'd like to actually ask the audience a couple of questions here as well. One is, how many of you are running a public cloud workload today? Raise your hand, show of hands. How many are running 5 or more applications in a public cloud? A couple. How many of you are running private clouds today? A few. Anybody want to shout out what they're using the private cloud for? Don't be shy. Say again? Testing, right? That one comes up a lot. Other private cloud? Say again? Development, right? So build, test, right? I know IBM's got big investments there. I'm sure HP does as well. Other private cloud workloads? Okay, let's move on. The second question I wanted to ask you is, the panel this morning was set up to talk about the relationship between cloud and mobile. That was an unfulfilled opportunity because we spent the time listening and talking about cloud. And I'm curious to know from our audience, how many of you would like to hear about mobile and cloud together? I thought so. I know I didn't set you guys up for this very well, and I could talk all day about it, but that's not the point. Can we talk a little bit about where cloud and mobile intersect, where the opportunities intersect, or where the challenges might lie? Does anybody want to raise their hand on that?
I'll give you an example of
Great.
potential that we're working on right now. So imagine that you're the scientist in your laboratory and you have our Thermo Fisher Scientific Laboratory Information Management System where we manage all of the data about your experiments. But you have also bought from us many of our high-end instruments or our centrifuges or whatever, all of which now have a computer inside of them. And we measure and monitor everything about what goes on in those instruments, refrigerators, centrifuges, whatever. We are now teaming with someone to drop remote diagnostics on those devices and publish those diagnostics to a private cloud. Mm-hmm. We're tying that with the LIMS, with the preventive maintenance and service records that we have in our core SAP system. Connecting that with our mobile device that our field service technicians will have, again, accessing much of that data in the cloud. So when it's a time for preventive maintenance, they get that, go see Dr. Jacks in some lab and fix this instrument, they'll know a lot of what's been going on. Yeah. Or if the centrifuge is starting to give bad spins or bad whatever and needs to pull in the data, then that mobile device will have that. So it's a connection of your legacy ERP system, your remote diagnostic on your instrumentation, the data coming out of your scientific experiments, and your field service technician's mobile device.
Did you ever think you'd be involved in anything that complicated?
Sure, we've done things like this for a long time. Okay. Now we just put it in the cloud. We used to carry it on these machines in our data centers.
Okay.
Yeah,
it sounds all very multi-party. So when something fails, who do you call?
Well, it depends upon which part fails. So you have to know your SLAs. You have to know how it all fits together. I mean, if you think about this, I was at Tyco International before I came to Thermo Fisher Scientific, and one of our major businesses was ADT North America, well, ADT Global, the security company. And if you think about the information that we had there on how many times the doors in Starbucks opened and closed, and we had unmanned delivery of bakery items that happened through the night. Yeah. There was a huge amount of opportunity there. Yeah. Huge amount of data. So
a lot of data.
It's not that complex.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. Other thoughts on the relationship between mobility and cloud? Yes, Sadiq.
I think this is a really exciting area, the convergence between cloud and mobility. I know many of you may be familiar with the life sciences industry. Pharma is going huge change. The way that salespeople typically drop in on physicians and how they allocate the work of drug promotion and so on, that whole industry is going through dramatic change. And I have a pharma company client who is looking at the cloud to be able to help respond to that change more nimbly. They know that it's a tremendous change that's on them, and they're moving their landscape towards a cloud-based model. But of course, their field is extremely mobile, right? And in terms of the time that these people have in front of physicians, the devices that they carry are kind of really the lifeblood of how they work. And what's very interesting is the way that now we're seeing that the use of tablets, to ultimately tie in with these cloud services, the capability that used to exist on their laptop, that used to take forever to truck around and get out, now instantaneously delivering analytics and content to that right physician at the right place and time. Yeah. And that's incredibly powerful. I mean, I feel like the cloud is the only way that they would have been able to do that. That's what their observation is that these two things that have just kind of come together.
Because of that efficiency and the ability to rapidly iterate it, but also then deliver to these mobile devices, right? Anything to add to that, Alan or Alan?
Yeah, I would just say we're seeing tremendous uptake in the
the will for people like in process and science that have all of these distributed controllers and SCADA and a centralized command system to be able to mobilize the end-to-end process experts down to the equipment by simply remoting nothing but pixels off of what used to be a central command station to their iPad.
Yeah.
And so that really opens up the opportunity to run any sort of legacy app on an iPad.
Yeah, interesting. Ali?
Yeah, I think actually I find the discussion very interesting, to be honest with you. We talk about mobile and cloud, but really what I heard was being able to access applications from a mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually go to your CRM application, doesn't have to be in a cloud, and many companies do it. So that's, I think, endemic of the issues that we see in the marketplace. The whole cloud story has created a little bit of confusion.
I'm sorry, a little bit of
It's created confusion.
Confusion.
Absolutely. I mean, you got the whole PaaS, IaaS, SaaS, everything else. And people tend to look at this thing as one giant blob that solves everything. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
There are definitely applications for mobile and cloud that make a lot of sense. For example, being able to store your documents and other information in a cloud that can be accessed from any device anywhere.
Yeah.
That's a real-life application of a mobile, convergence of mobile and cloud. But when we look at other things, such as access to information, that's really a delivery channel and a computing model.
Yeah.
So it's very important as you look at embracing a new technology like cloud computing to really understand the outcomes of the business function that you're trying to achieve, understand the environment and the availability of the architectures, and make some real right decisions. It's not you just can't step into it.
Yeah, good. This is such a multi-dimensional topic, and one of the dimensions that comes up again and again and again is, do I have the right skills and processes to work effectively with this new resource? And again, could I turn to you again and say, have you learned or discovered that you have skills, new kinds of skills that are important in this environment?
Yes, our own employees, we have to improve their skills. They've got to learn some new things. This is why we're doing it with our Tier 1 suppliers and our partners.
Yeah, so they have the skills already, you feel. Now, do you ask them about what their capabilities are in a skills kind of way? I mean, how is it you establish that they're a good provider for you?
You have a very well-run supplier management program, and we have 10 Tier 1 suppliers that we work with on a regular basis. And for the 3.5 years I've been the CIO at Thermo Fisher, we have strategic design reviews, strategic business reviews, where we review the strategy of what we're doing, they review the strategy of what they're doing, and then we figure out where we're good to team with together to do things. So through that, I've watched how they've been preparing to do more in the cloud, to get more prepared. So that's how I figure out, well, now we're going to work with these guys or those guys.
Yeah, okay, good. Other skill stories, ideas, issues?
Sure. I mean, again, I think I talked about it before. Sorry, but the whole notion of, again, enterprise computing and being able to leverage the cloud services effectively does not absolve the CIO of having a good, robust operational processes. You have to have it probably a little bit more than you anticipated before. I think you asked a very pertinent question. When something goes wrong, who do you call?
Yeah.
And again, that simple question actually is a very difficult one to answer.
Yeah.
And you have to really have an excellent handle on your processes, your maturity of your processes, to be able to work with the different vendors so you can set the right expectation, have the right contracts and SLAs in place so you don't fail as a business. The risk goes up. And I think that's the key that folks, as I mentioned, miss in the euphoria and the rush to embrace this new thing, that somehow cloud means you don't have to do those things. It absolutely does not, let you off the hook, unfortunately.
Sudeep, were you going to add something to that?
I think it's the same point. This term around governance is bandied around a lot, but I think it really does apply here. There's a different model for trying to drive this change. The processes are not the same. There are differences. So I see a client who's they selected a cloud service 18 months ago, and they're struggling now. And when you peel back the onion, they're applying the same traditional models, and it doesn't work. It's the kiss of death for adoption of the cloud service. At the same time, you've got those places that have very departmental, viral in terms of their take-up, and they're unwinding too, because they don't have that type of structure and process around it. There's a balance, and I feel like many of these companies who are really getting some success is that they've thought about that with purpose versus kind of stumbling on it by a kind of accident.
So we're getting onto this faster iterative cycle, and that requires a new approach, a new skill, a new relationship with the business. Say a little bit more about that.
I mean, there's a different division of labor, so there's clearly different roles, and even the cloud providers are in that mix, right? There's much more transparency across the different folks. I think that there's fundamentally a different set of metrics that you're driving, in terms of what is success with this kind of model, and it's fundamentally balancing control and risk with the innovation, change, agility, speed. You kind of how you get that right balance is kind of crucial.
Yeah. Good. I just want to set up that we are going to open to questions now. So we're all going to take them and move on, and take them and move on. But if you've got a question you'd like to ask, go ahead and queue up at the microphone and introduce yourself, your organization, and your question in literally 12 words. Right? Don't give us a long backstory. Just ask the question really directly, please. While people are doing that, I'd like to just drill a little bit deeper into this sort of skills transition or opportunity, and ask the question about how the business is involved. Who's driving not the vendor selection, but who's driving it, right? Because I know, based on our work with clients, that a lot of this motivation to harness these cloud services and cloud opportunities are coming because there's a competitive or a real business imperative there. So talk a little bit about the nature of the change between the CIO organization and CMO, sales, other parts of the organization. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll take that one.
Right.
So it's interesting we all have shadow IT issues sometimes. Shadow IT is a user with a credit card, in a cloud world a lot of times. So I think that it really shifts the focus on the CIO as being the keeper of the operational systems to be the broker of services. Yeah. You have to really change the way you think as that broker in the organization to understand what's available, at what levels, the portfolio, I think that's a great point, that's available to you, and make the recommendation in the light of what the business has, the outcomes you want to achieve to the various business units.
To be that advisor, that counselor. I mean, you must see that.
Well, at the end of the day, the board of directors holds me accountable as the steward of our data and our information. So the risk of our IP getting out there in the world, the risk of our customer data being shared, the risk of that is my responsibility to manage that. So when we look at doing a customer transaction survey solution in the cloud, we have to own that data. We've got to manage the security of it. I've got to know who's got access to it, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't care if somebody else is providing it in the cloud. They're not answering to the board of directors, I am.
Yeah, and I think that's key. The buck stops with you. I got to share a little personal story here. Hopefully won't bore you, but we wrote a book last year, Josh Bernoff and myself, called Empowered, published not by MIT, sadly, but by Harvard, so that was okay. And I wanted to write about consumerization. And Josh wanted to write about the impact of social and mobile on customer experience. And it turned out that it was the same topic. Because consumerization, where it's occurring, is occurring because at the edge of the organization, in sales and marketing and product development. But the long story short, we did all this research, did a huge survey, we had 25 stories, and Josh was trying to convince me that the main message was that IT didn't matter. And I said, I finally had to sit him down in a room and say, all right, we have 25 stories, find me one of those stories where there wasn't the CIO or the IT organization at the heart of the solution. And of course, he couldn't. Because while the idea came from the business, the execution at scale came because it was a combination of the business requirement, the business success, and the IT provisioning and enablement of it. So once again, we proved that, but we found this same point, right? We're advisors, we're consultants, we're responsible, but it does raise us up. It's harder. We have to respond better, more efficiently, more. Are you finding that?
We're brokers, we're managers, we're connectors, we're contract writers, we're reviewers, we're risk analyzers.
You're the professionals. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very important.
We understand scalability. operational breakage,
Yeah.
outages, the importance of when it's down for 30 seconds, what does that mean? When
Yeah.
you have a blip, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it just didn't go blip. I mean, something happened.
Yeah. Alan.
I would add to that you know, as a CIO, to become a strategic role for these types of business decisions, you don't want any opacity, upstream, so to speak. You want to have those levels of control that say, okay, I've got a mastery of this, even if it's outsourced in such a way.
Right.
And you know, we work with, I mean, when I'm doing the work with the ISVs, we've always got someone at the end of the food chain, such as Thermo Fisher, and you know, that's the whole success story that we have to come up with, is how does it get put into play in the real world?
Yeah, yeah. So in this, and we're moving into business transformation after we take some questions, but let me just ask the audience. So today, very, very few CIOs become CEOs. You know, it's a small fraction. You can count them on one hand, basically. Who thinks that we're going to have 10 times as many CIOs becoming CEOs 5 years from now than we have today? Okay, a couple of you brave souls. I think you need to set the bar a little higher for yourselves. I think the technology enablement, we talked about disruption of technology on various industries. It's every industry. Every industry is an information industry. We just heard from Ina that that's a critical component of their customer value prop. Let's go ahead and take some audience questions, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Mike Karp. I'm a principal analyst with the firm of Patak Noel. And I'd like to begin by saying how I think that, Ali, your comment was very resonant when you said that, in essence, you can delegate authority for the data, but you, as a CIO, you maintain the responsibility. And I think that's very clearly put. Those of us that have been involved in implementation of cloud at both the private and the public level, and I'm surprised nobody mentioned the hybrid environments, know that there's more to it than technology and skills. There's also the engagement with line of business owners. And I'd like to get some comment from the panelists on how you go about engaging with people whose responsibility and whose profitability are in your hands. How do you win them over?
How do you win them over?
All right, I can take that one.
Okay.
I think that's an excellent example. One of the areas that at least that we get engaged in, this is not a self-promotion comment, but we have a service that's called Cloud Discovery Workshop. It's not sophisticated, it's very pedantic. There's panels, and you walk around the panels as a group, and you write sticky notes on a table to highlight, record your thoughts. The reason why we developed that particular service was what we found in order to embrace the cloud scenario. Traditionally, we were attacking and discussing the same topic with different folks within the organization. The CIO, sometimes the CFO, the business users, IT, operational staff, and it just took a long time. And the views that we were getting back were not consistent. So what we found was a disconnect between the business users and what IT thought the cloud really meant for them. So we developed a workshop, and as a result of that, the way it runs is we try to gather everyone in business and IT at the same time. Yeah. And we share with them our experiences. We try to describe the different elements of a cloud scenario so they collectively can come to an agreement. And the typical comment that we get back as a result of that is what they did in a week, they would have spent 6 months doing. And I think that goes to the questioner's comment, that if you don't have that level of resonance between the business users and what they're trying to achieve from an operational perspective and what you can provide as a CIO, then you're not going to be successful. And somebody needs to facilitate that for you at the end of the day.
So there's an embeddedness, is that how you would describe it, or is it just a linkage starting to be created?
I think both. You have to create the linkage, and the more embedded you become as the provider and the broker of information within the line of the business, the more trusted you become, then magic happens at that particular point.
Yeah, yeah. Ina, is that your experience as well?
Well, there's two sides of this. There's when we're trying to bring our business partners with us to get to a solution for them in the cloud. There's also a lot of applications, many of you are out there, that are selling to our business people and forgetting that the CIO needs to be there too. So there's that side when the business is actually coming to me going, oh, I found this great application and this provider runs it in the cloud, and they tell us that if we just send them the data, they can have it up on Monday. Yeah, right. So, okay, now let's go through all the things we have to do before we're going to send them the data to come up on Monday. So we need several Mondays to go through this process. So
a month of Mondays.
A month of Mondays would be good. So the processes are not the same. The operational are not the same. But you've got to go through the same elements of the risk and management and control. I'm sounding like a repeating record here.
Well, otherwise it's like sophomore chemistry. You know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be safe. So, I think that's important. Any other thoughts on this business IT relationship and how it changes?
Just one comment I make. I think there's a lot more transparency now with IT people around the metrics that the business are trying to drive. And it's not easy, actually, because when you get to the crunch, cloud is such as, you said, it's a nebulous term. It's so ambiguous. So what precisely is it about cloud that's actually going to drive a subset of these metrics? And it's very powerful was when the IT folks actually focus on those specific metrics, they're driving this change that's just kind of really transformation. Much more collaboration in a way that many of these organizations haven't done before.
Well, let's talk about the business transformation side of this. Let's project out a few years and ask the question, what does it look like? I'm sitting 5 years out and we're having a discussion about a new customer application or a new workforce application. What does that sound like? What is the role of cloud in that discussion? Is it all cloud all the time? Is it hybrid cloud? Whatever the heck that is, I know, but nobody else does. I think talk to me about the business transformation and the long view of this cloud thing. Where does it go? Anybody want to jump on in? Looking for energy.
Sure. So, interesting question. So, if you step back a few years to SOA, and look back at the promise of SOA. SOA was about service. You get it, you use it, you don't worry about where it comes from. And in a large degree, cloud enables SOA. That's really what it does. So as the market matures and we get more robust public services that are cloud-based, as we develop hybrid scenarios, so we are able to link our on-premise clouds with public clouds, what you really get into is the ability to be able to talk about the business drivers and the outcomes you want to achieve without having to worry about and be limited to some degree by the apps that may be available to you. So it's really becomes a composition of a solution.
So we stitch things together.
Absolutely together. I think that's the major drive.
And Ani, you were actually describing that with the application you were talking about.
It's definitely a hybrid environment. The legacy systems are going to be there a long time. Our transaction processing systems are going to be there. It's how we glue and put pieces together.
And so the competitive advantage will be how well formed those integration points are so you can rapidly, is that,
one comment is I think the hybrid is not just the end state. It's not just saying, okay, well, look, you've got a heterogeneous environment with private cloud and public cloud stitched together. It's also the transition over time. And I think what people often forget is actually the interim states are absolutely as hard to architect as the end state, right? Because it's really difficult to kind of have these interim architectures actually be viable. How do you actually make trade-off decisions for the business to automate some pieces and not others? And I feel like the hybrid is not just about the end state architecture, it's also the roadmap, the journey together.
Yeah. So we might move workloads in some cases, but we're going to stitch together what's best, what's available, and that will change. That composition will change over time.
I would say we're seeing it now. I mean, everything is not static on-prem mainframe or LDAP to what's available in the cloud. That's part of it. But as you said, dev and test was one of the main cases cited. I mean, we see a lot of usage of spinning something up in the cloud, allowing configuration of it, bringing the workload down to private, potentially, obfuscating or anonymizing some of the data to ship it back out to the cloud for some, for top secret type of vendor access where needed. And at the end of the day, being able to retire that and catalog it and tag it and sort of take a snapshot in time for financial services, for instance. I'm a hedge fund, and this is what, this was the Libya, perceived oil crisis. And these were the analytics we were doing at the time, and then ship that off and retire it and be able to recall it.
Good. We have a question from the audience, please.
Hi. My name is Nishad, and I'm a sales rep with a company called Mahindra Satyam. And this is a question like, today I see that enterprises typically have 3 types of applications. You have in-house applications, you have hosted applications, and you have got applications on the cloud. So my question to the audience is that which is the biggest challenge that you see in such an environment? Is it integration? Is it testing or anything else? And how do you address that biggest challenge?
So the question about challenges, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So let's go ahead and let's reveal the challenges.
Integrating it all together.
Integration, big challenge. Yeah, we've talked about security, certainly. Alan.
I would say the CLA problem, which to modernize, right?
Which ones? Prioritization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting about the integration. It's not about the pipe work, because that's actually as easy with the cloud as other places. It's the same issue as any kind of integration challenge around data, master data management, and so on. I mean, those things don't go away with the cloud. And I think that's a challenge around integration specifically.
Yeah. Ali, anything to add to the challenges list?
No, I think you've touched it. Integration, security, governance, resiliency, service levels, and all of the typical things that you would expect out there.
How about data lock-in? Will we add that to the list of challenges?
I think in a large, that's somewhat, I think, maybe will become less of an issue as time goes on.
We'll be able to get our data back out. We'll be able to move that Mac truck of disks
but I think there are some interesting scenarios. Like, for example, if you're running your application on a public cloud provider, is your data being backed up? And if it's being backed up, is it actually recoverable when you get the tape? I mean, how would you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just like little things like that.
Anybody tested Mosey yet? Actually my machine went down, recover from Mosey? Right, yes. Same issue, right? Good, another question, please.
My name is Dheeraj Gokulani. I'm HP Software. And the question was more around, are businesses, as well as the IT supporting the business, reviewing the way they measure themselves in terms of return of investment or effectiveness because of the cloud? So essentially adding that as a parameter, and how are they doing that?
I mean, honestly, guys, the business, they don't care where the applications are running or where the data is being stored or whatever. They don't care. They just want how much do I have to invest? What's the business value I'm going to get from this? How fast can you get me to market? Where are my metrics to prove that this was a worthwhile investment? Yeah. There could be monkeys in the back room with abacuses.
And they wouldn't.
I would add that you're moving from a cost center to a profit center. You've got to be able to participate and say that this is how we achieve new market share and faster, bigger, better, faster, more is what.
So this is why CIOs have an opportunity to become CEOs.
There you go.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? I feel like maybe we're reaching a winding down kind of point here. Any last thoughts to share with our audience?
I mean, I'll take one. I think I'll go back to my opening example that I gave you. If you look at cloud, and again, we're talking about transformation, enabling transformation using cloud, definitely there's some fantastic ways to be able to increase operational efficiency, reduce costs, and become more flexible, all the good stuff. I think that the tricky part in this is you have a new medium, you have a new technology base, and I think you have to look at it orthogonally and to say, is there a way for me to create opportunity, to create value based on this platform, knowing what I know, as opposed to just running things better?
Yeah.
And that's a very tricky question to ask, and probably is not an easy one to answer by the average bear. So that's, I think, is going to be the big question.
So how do I do that opportunity mapping? Yeah, Ina, you're smiling.
Well, I'm smiling because I'm the old cynic in the room, right?
Yeah.
So, go back a gazillion years when some of us started our careers, we couldn't afford to have a computer in our companies.
Right.
So we bought timeshare and threw a mainframe somewhere. So then we said, well, you know what? We can keep our computers here, and then we had the Unix and the PCs and whatever. So I don't want to be the extreme cynic here, but aren't we just doing timeshare back somewhere on somebody else's machine because I don't want to afford it?
So then we want the cheapest, best, most secure timeshare we can find, presumably, where the integration's the easiest. Yeah, so the sophomoric public cloud providers have to take that on board probably, huh? Any last thoughts, Alan?
I would just say that, to piggyback what Ali was saying, there is, by sort of freeing yourself of what has historically been true, there are, in fact, new opportunities to achieve in a greenfield, lift and shift, I've heard it been put, flexibility and control. Things that you normally would have not thought could go together, that are normally juxtaposed, are I believe, in some ways achievable.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Sudeep, last word?
I think just to close, not all cloud providers are created equal. And it requires the normal due diligence that you do as if you're outsourcing a critical function in your company. And it's that type of analysis that's kind of still crucial. Just because it's cloud doesn't replace that.
Yeah, still a tremendous amount of hard work to do. A little bit, and this is my term certainly, a little bit early in the game as far as the skill set of the public cloud providers. The big guys are coming. We're going to have wholesale cloud as opposed to retail cloud, which is what Google and Amazon have. Pretty soon now, I would guess, and folks like HP and IBM and AT&T and Verizon Business and Orange and BT and NTT and well, we'll do that. I think what VMware is doing is important as far as assembling a toolkit of stuff that a telco or a service provider can deploy. I'm intrigued by this idea that we will all be service providers hosting applications and services on behalf of our customer engagement. I'm intrigued by that. I think that's a very important and probably a little bit scary at some level, because the skills you will need or will need to partner to provide, things like onboarding and securing and group-based authentication and integration and data recovery, all those things I think will be challenging but important. The help, right, from an organization such as an Accenture or Hewlett-Packard or CSC, as you described, becomes important. I think the world in many ways gets more convoluted, more interconnected. There's more reliance on the suppliers. And so picking the suppliers feels ever more important to me, because you're betting on their roadmap, and they're betting that you're going to help them develop their business, I guess. And so the partnership also seems very, very important to me. I would say we're in the second inning of a 9-inning baseball game. Anybody want to put out another inning as to where we are in the cloud journey? Top of the second, bottom of the second?
In cricket, it's closing for tea. I think, yeah, that's what
Okay, why don't we call it a night? Thank you very much for our panelists.